Welcome to the Dirt on the Past,
the Museum Edition,
a YouTube and podcast program of the Extreme History Project, which explores ancient and historical topics relating to artifact collections from the Museum of the Rockies right here in Bozeman, Montana.
At Extreme History, we explore the good, the bad, and the ugly about our human past because, let's face it, history isn't pretty. But it's so important to know because it's at the very thing that has led us to the most critical concerns in the present.
So join me, Nancy Mahoney,
and me, Crystal Alegria,
as we talk to archaeologists and historians who have been digging in the dirt
and in the archives
and in museum collections to uncover fascinating histories that are relevant to today's issues
and can help us move forward with a deeper understanding of the past.
Welcome, everyone, to this week's edition of the show. I'm Nancy.
And I'm Crystal.
And we are the co-hosts of The Dirt on the Past. This week, we're at the Museum of the Rockies E.L. Wigand Digital Learning Studio with guest Ashley Hall. Yay! Ashley Hall's usually behind the scenes. And we have her in front of the camera this time, and we get to ask her so many interesting questions. So we are collaborating with the Museum of the Rockies, located in Bozeman, Montana, to bring you this new version of the podcast called The Dirt on the Past Museum Edition. We're joined today by Ashley, who is the Museum of Rockies Outreach Program Manager, who helps us record the podcast most weeks, which she's also doing this week. And she's also our guest. So that's a lot going on over there.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. We thought it would be nice for you all to meet Ashley and learn more about what she does at the Museum of the Rockies as a science educator and beyond. So welcome.
Thank you.
Yay. We're so excited.
Yeah. You're here with us,
It's
Ashley.
nice to be in front of the camera sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Instead of just peeking in from the side.
Whenever we reference Ashley now in the future, this is Ashley.
Now you all know all about her.
Yeah.
And she always looks like this. Rain or shine any day of the week. Perfect makeup, perfect hair, always elegant. And on top of that, she's super smart. So this is going to be fun.
And that's why we wanted to talk to you today, Ashley, because of all the amazing things that you do.
Yeah. So we've got quite a little intro here to go through. So I'm going to say all of it because there's so many interesting things.
I should have cut this bio down for you.
No, I like it as it is because it tells all the various things that I think give potential students ideas about what they can do. Okay.
That's true.
So we're going to start out. Ashley is a dynamic paleontologist, naturalist, and museum educator. Originally from South Bend, Indiana, she grew up loving dinosaurs from an early age and was inspired by holiday trips to Chicago's Field Museum. I've been there many times and also very inspired. And she then pursued a career in natural history. Ashley earned her Bachelor of Arts in anthropology, yay, with a focus on Zooarchaeology. I know we both, yes, I know, I know. That's why we like each other, I know. Bachelor of Arts in anthropology with a focus in zooarchaeology from Indiana University of Bloomington. After graduation, she spent nearly a decade working as a science educator for various educational institutions in Southern California, including the Los Angeles Zoo and Botanical Gardens, Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County, and the Brea Tar Pits. Wow, that's super cool. So during this time, Ashley also served as the assistant curator of paleontology at the Raymond M. Alf Museum of Paleontology in Claremont, California. While at the Alf, she managed the fossil collection and participated in fieldwork, including Late Cretaceous dinosaur excavations at the Grand Stay National Monument in Utah and Miocene mammal reconnaissance paleontology in the Mojave Desert's Rainbow Basin. Ashley relocated to Ohio. How could you leave those beautiful places?
Living.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. Yep. So relocating to Ohio, where she worked as a naturalist for the Cleveland Metro Parks Reservation System before taking a position with the Cleveland Museum of Natural History as the adult programs coordinator. When Ashley is not educating the public in person, she is an active science communicator on social media. Ashley has presented several invited workshops on communicating science through social media at professional scientific meetings, including the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology and the Association for Materials and Methods in Paleontology, those annual conferences. Her scientific research has focused on sauropod claw morphology and function, which I'm very excited to hear about,
Yeah.
and the evolution of birds from deposits at the Brea Tar Pits. In her free time, how do you have any? Ashley loves hiking, rock climbing, visiting museums, and spending time with her husband and 2 cats. All right. So we've got a lot to dig into there, Ashley. Yeah, so
I'm
exciting.
happy this is a different kind of digging because
Yes.
you know, a
We're
lot of
digging
times
into your
people-
mind. I
Yeah.
know.
like people always get archaeology and paleontology confused.
always. Right.
Maybe with you guys as well.
Oh,
Oh,
You
sure.
get asked if you dig dinosaurs.
All the
Yeah.
time.
Okay.
All
Yeah.
the
I
time.
should have worn my shirt that says I do not dig dinosaurs.
Yes,
I
yes.
have one.
Yeah.
Maybe we can get a
Yeah.
picture of it.
Yeah.
I will,
And then we
I
can
will.
give you one and you can cross out the
Yeah.
knot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And that's a great thing to bring up, Ashley,
Yeah.
right at the get-go, because as anthropologists, Nancy and I, or
Yeah.
archaeologists, we get, people will come up to us and talk to us all the time about dinosaurs, and we must have these very blank looks because
Well, sometimes they come with what they think is a dinosaur bone or a fossil, and
Montana,
and we'll
sure.
say, well, we're an archaeologist. Yeah, but don't you know what this is? And I'm like, yeah, I could make something up, but no.
So I
Yeah.
always say, well, archaeologists do human
Yes.
studies, and paleontologists do dinosaur
Everything
studies.
Right.
else. Yeah.
Paleoanthropology
Yeah,
is the
so-
closest we get.
Yes.
So way far back to human ancestors, those fossils.
Yeah,
but
there's
right.
archaeology, there's paleontology, and then there's paleoanthropology, which is like the marriage of both of them.
Yes.
And where we get to play together sometimes.
Right.
So
I know. I know.
Which we might have a little crossover in this conversation today.
yeah,
So-
Absolutely.
So, Ashley, your bio mentions that, of course, you love dinosaurs. You
Mhm.
love all things paleontology. Really, from an early age, you
Yeah.
had that passion right from the get-go. And so, can you tell me a little bit about what piqued your interest as a young child in dinosaurs
Yeah.
and the paleontology and all those ancient creatures?
Yeah.
And then, can you tell me a little bit about your connection to the Field Museum or
Yes.
to a museum, and if that fostered your love even more?
Oh, I
as
love
we
this
sit
so
in this
much.
beautiful
Yeah,
museum
I
today,
know.
so.
You can't tell that I'm a museum person, can you? I think we've said on previous episodes that I designed the studio, but truly this is what my brain looks like, I always say.
That's awesome. Yep.
But yeah, as a kid, actually, so I was inspired by dinosaur toys, as most people, most kids are, I think. Dinosaur toys are one of those things that's a tangible that is also a real thing. Like it's a real animal based in, evolution and science in the world. It's not like, teddy bears are great, but it's like they don't live in the wild.
Right.
They're based on bears, but dinosaurs are actually like the gateway to science is what, many of us always say. And so it's my interest was piqued very much by dinosaur toys, and then going to the library. My mom was a huge advocate of just going to the library and going to look for books about dinosaurs, bringing them home. I mean, what a great resource. And to
Yeah.
date myself a little bit, we were checking out VHS tapes as well.
Oh, I know,
So-
right? Do you remember the first time it really clicked for you that at one point there were dinosaurs walking all over the earth before there were humans, and that they don't walk the earth really now in the forms that we see them in
Yeah.
museums? Do you remember like what that was like, getting your mind around that?
I think, part of that had to be, so there were VHS tapes that actually Museum of the Rockies had produced.
Oh,
which is
wow.
so weird.
That's
right?
that full
Because we're here
circle.
now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Jack Horner was a huge inspiration for
Mm.
me as a kid because I was born in 1984, and going to the library, we had VHS tapes, and a lot of them were dinosaur digs, like actually showing Jack Horner up at Egg Mountain digging up Maiasaura. And so for years, what seems like millions of years, I have admired Jack's work and was inspired by him. And so it was a little bit of everything. It was a little bit of dinosaur toys, library books, being exposed to real paleontologists who were actively working and digging stuff out of the ground, and that sort of essence of discovery, the draw of like the curiosity that you get when you're you know, seeing something for the first time that, you know, no other human has, like that's really
Right.
powerful for kids to see,
You
know,
can go
about.
out to the world and discover something
Yeah.
that hasn't been seen.
And
Yeah.
it's that bridge too. There's something there. And I know psychology has, you know, different psychologists have done different studies on kids, and you've probably seen recently on the internet where it's like kids who study dinosaurs are smarter or whatever. That meme was going around for a little bit based on research, but it's pretty cool that you can take something that's like a dinosaur toy and then connect it immediately with the earth. Like kids have that immediate connection. Like insects are like this too, right? Kids like bugs. And so, you know, kids go and find bugs outside, they can learn about them, study them up close. And so these like, you know, simple dinosaur toys and like insects and things like that are very like powerful. I don't know, just things that kids can have ownership over.
It is. It's like that
Right?
first level of inquiry. It's a model of something
Yeah.
else. Exactly.
And
Yeah.
I don't know if there's like is there well, I mean, so I was inspired too by Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
I mean, who
Yeah.
wasn't? I don't know.
Right, right.
And so that's really what made me pursue anthropology as well. But you know, as a kid going into the Field Museum of Natural History, which was like an hour and a half away. Shout out to the Field Museum. I always like tag them on social media in all of my posts and stuff whenever I talk about them, because honestly, if it weren't for museums, libraries would have been my kind of way into the field, I think. But being exposed to a dinosaur that is towering above you, right? And
Yes.
going into an Egyptian pyramid where you can
Yes.
see all of the artifacts and mummies and beautiful pieces,
It's that
you know?
tangible, it's that tangible link to these things that
Yeah.
you can reach out and touch it, or you can visually just see it right in front of you.
Yeah.
And that's what the museum has that the library really doesn't.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Right.
nice.
It's
Yeah.
very powerful.
Yeah.
For me, it was we would have field trips into the Museum of Natural History in New York City. That would be the big field trip in, and you get to go to those. And then my parents always liked to go to the Met. And so there would be a lot of Egyptian and wonderful
Yes.
archaeology stuff in there, aside from the art, and then all of the amazing things in the Museum of Natural History. And it's so strange to stand in front of a full T-Rex the first time you see one, and how big they are, and the teeny tiny arms, which
Yes.
are fascinating. And I still don't feel like I fully understand
I
that.
know.
And so going on from that, so you had all that inspiration, and then you went to school and you studied this and you followed through. It wasn't
Yeah.
the disappointment. And it led you to do research and do what you do today. So can you tell us a little bit about your research interests in paleontology, and then especially about the sauropod feet? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Because
And-
I read a little bit and I'm like, what?
So I brought some visuals.
Oh, yay.
And for our podcast listeners, maybe a reminder that this is a visual thing as well.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
if you're not seeing it, you can go on to YouTube and
Yep.
see it.
And
Yeah.
then you can see the visuals,
The images. Yeah.
the images, and the everything we're going to talk about here
Okay.
in the next minute.
Hang on momentarily.
Okay.
We may
Yes.
have to cut this part because I have to go.
Well,
Okay.
you know what? We don't have to cut it, because I want to say something too.
Okay.
Is that kind of going back to Ashley, what you were talking about with the field museums are just so important. And you, Nancy, with the museum in New York, and I have a museum that I came in right now.
Right.
So I grew
right.
up not far from here. And so this museum was really an important place for me. Not as much for the dinosaurs, but for the archaeological collections that they had. And that is where I really learned to have a love for history and archaeology, is from this museum. So
Yeah.
I just
Oh,
wanted
yeah.
to
That's
do a
wonderful.
shout out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Just do a shout out to this
We used
museum.
to capture, I think
Yeah.
like it's so powerful to hear like people's, you know,
Yes. How it's
Spark,
influenced them,
right?
what the spark
Yeah.
is.
yeah.
Yeah. Did with the university and in this town, because there's not that many. There's small ones scattered around Montana, but we're lucky to have this one, which is so big.
So lucky.
Holds so much. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's jump to, I brought some slides.
Yay.
And it's a talk that I've sort of piecemealed together a few of my favorite slides, because I have a very like, I don't know if anyone has a traditional way through. I mean, I think it's more common now to sort of like find a weird, wacky path into what you're doing, because who has a normal pathway? I don't know.
Exactly.
And so hopefully this works. What's happening? There we go.
There we go.
Aha.
Wonderful.
Okay. So, this is, we have to, maybe you can edit that part out. Okay, so here is me as a little
my
kid.
Goodness.
So, speaking of like a spark moment, this
Wow.
is Chicago when Dynamation came through, which was like animatronic dinosaurs, and
Very cool.
this was I'm so happy my parents captured this photo because you can see my face and just how excited I am.
Yes.
And my favorite dinosaur is Parasaurolophus right there, and that's
what
actually
we're looking at.
That's a
Yep.
crazy
Okay.
head.
It
thing.
is.
Is there a bone that goes back in
Yeah.
there? It's not just cartilage.
No, it's a full
What is the purpose of that?
great question. So it's actually for sound.
Ah.
And so
okay.
it's hollow tubes that the animal was to push air up through its head, and it came back down and made a sound similar to like a French horn.
Wow.
So,
That's
very cool.
fantastic.
and then here
Oh, look
is
at
a T-Rex
Oh
there.
my goodness, look at you. Oh.
And that's my brother there next to me. So, you know, thanks to my parents who sparked my interest in paleontology. I just, you know, I found it from a very young age and just never gave it up like a lot of kids.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
Right.
great.
So my research on sauropod feet. So my primary job is to be a science educator and communicator, but I do dabble in research from time to time. I'm not an academic. I don't teach in a university, but I teach kids in museums and also adults. And so it's important to me that I keep my mind and my my interest in research. So I'm always reading scientific papers, keeping up on literature, because as science communicators, we actually take that information and distill it for kids. And so, and the public. So, one of my research interests has been sauropod feet. And this is a sauropod leg. So if you don't know what a sauropod is, the long neck dinosaurs that are so classic. So the Jurassic Park Brachiosaurus is a good example. And
So,
these animals
A
here,
sauropod then is like a class of dinosaurs.
Yes.
It's not just one kind, it's not a
Right.
species, because I don't know my levels
Yeah.
of distinction. Okay. So,
So, like,
Brachiosaurus
Brachiosaurus.
is a type of sauropod.
Exactly.
Fantastic.
So Brachiosaurus, Apatosaurus,
Are they all very large?
Right, from days
Flintstones?
past. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. They're all really big. There are some small ones. There's
Okay.
actually a few dwarf species, but
And are they primarily plant eaters,
Mhm.
herbivores? Okay.
yep, every single one we found is a plant eater. I'm sure at some point one swallowed a bug or something, but
Because your little model here has tiny teeth, so it just
Yeah.
occurred to me that we're not seeing flesh-eating teeth on the
right.
sky. So true to form.
True to
Yeah,
form.
good.
Yes. So
Okay.
they are long-necked animals that have 4 pillars as legs and this very long tail. This is actually a model of a sauropod baby that
Aw.
is from an exhibit that the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles created. And what I really love pointing out about this is the true like sauropod body form. So any sauropod you see is going to look like this with a little bit of variation. The cool thing about this is you can kind of see there's little spots here. These spots and scales were actually found on the embryos of some dinosaurs in Patagonia. So you can touch this and actually feel.
Yeah, it's got a
Um,
rough, bumpy kind of surface.
yeah.
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 So scales, is
Oh,
that
yeah.
common beyond sauropods?
So scales, yeah. So scales and feathers are typically.
Scales or feathers
Mhm.
and feathers? Can you have both on the same animal?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So just like a chicken where you have the sort of scaly
Oh,
legs
yes,
and then
sure.
the feathers.
Sure.
A lot of dinosaurs like Velociraptor, T-Rex may have had a little bit of both.
Okay.
So with there are long neck dinosaurs that have these big pillar-like legs, and at the end of these legs, they have feet, and their feet on the front. So think about your front arms, but down on the ground. So the front feet, or manus, have variations of claws. So they have a giant claw that you can see there on the front foot. So imagine your thumb.
Okay.
That would be this animal's same digit.
The one with the claw.
Yep, so digit 1. And then on the feet, they have a bunch of claws. And most sauropods have at least 2 on their back feet, if not more, mostly 3 with like maybe a 4th. And then the little tiny toe back there doesn't have any claw, but they have these massive claws.
Wow.
And so when you look at sauropod claws across various different groups of sauropods, you can kind of see that the front feet is going to be the top slide there. The front feet have a big claw on the thumb, and some of them don't even have digits or phalanges at all. So for a Pisthecelicadia right here on the end, I'll mouse over it. So you get here some big, digit 1 claws,
Yes.
big digit 1 claws in Camarasaurus, Apatosaurus. And then once you get to Brachiosaurus, these phalanges start actually going away.
More like toes or what?
So imagine if our for example, like if we have our hand, so that's what their front feet would be like. But if you just walked on your metacarpals.
Okay.
And then you had little claws coming out of your
No
this guy.
claws. Not at all. So then on this one, Pisthecelicadia, they evolve away their fingers.
Wow. Wow.
There's no fingers there. It's just
Yeah.
metacarpals.
It's just so like these knuckles where we have knuckles. Okay, that's it. They just didn't grow them after that, or some of them it just became an evolutionary
And so
little
they have these
appendix or whatever. Yeah.
most of them have like the thumb claw, and
Okay.
then they walk on their metacarpals.
Oh, interesting.
But the back feet, which is cool, that's my specialization, is you have sort of an early sauropod foot here with 4 digits. Most tetrapod animals started out with 5 digits. And then you go down, and as they evolve, they get these really big claws here on their back feet. So our question was kind of proposed as a counter hypothesis to a hypothesis that had been put out there, which was, do sauropods use their claws to get stuck out from mud?
Okay.
Which is a weird thing to talk about, right? But like when you think about these big animals that are walking around, you have these
They're so heavy.
100-ton animals. And when they're walking along, if they get post holed, one colleague of ours said, well, they may use their claws to help unmire them. Like maybe they're using their claws that way. So we took to looking into it because we said challenge accepted. Let's look into see if that's true at all. And so with paleontology, we have a bunch of analogs that we use because birds and reptiles are their closest living relatives. So that would be phylogenetic bracketing and trying to figure out what those similar animals do in those situations with those similar features. So the top row here, A, B, and C, those are tortoise feet.
Okay.
And tortoises are a really good sort of animal to look at when you're looking at these feet, because birds have a very different type of foot, very highly modified. They're not quite there. Alligators are aquatic. Like, it just doesn't really make sense. But when you look at a tortoise foot, it looks pretty darn similar. So the bottom row, A, B, and C here, these show sauropod feet. So they're not so different.
Yeah.
And I should say too that sauropods have always been compared to elephants.
Right.
And so
because they're big, heavy with these pillar, like I was thinking about that. And the way these toes are on the model here, I felt like we were almost seeing something that looked like what I think of as elephant toes. So I was curious as to what you were going to say, because elephants don't have claws. Some mammals have claws, but
And so when we look at similar animals, we're not looking at elephants because they're mammals. I mean,
they're farther away in terms of relatedness. Okay.
Evolutionary history and such. And so they are compared most to elephants, which is incorrect because elephants are mammals. They have very flat feet. So figure A here is the bottom of an elephant's foot that I drew. This was our
that foot
drawings of those.
And they'll do if you go visit elephants.
Yes.
We did this again on our year of travel during my husband's sabbatical, and we had the chance to interact with elephants in different ways, and they could make a footprint for you. They would paint and they would do stuff, and that's exactly what the footprint looked like. So I might have been able to guess that if that was a Jeopardy question.
That's awesome. Yeah, what is this thing?
I would
Right.
never guess that.
I know.
And
And no one would have blamed you. I know.
you know, as mammals, they have nails, and
Right,
so
right.
their nails are made of keratin, just like dinosaur claws. But claws are very different shape than an elephant toenail, which is like very flush with the foot. And so the bottom of the elephant's foot, we looked at as sort of a similar analogy for the bottom, because this is the sauropod's foot on the bottom, and you can see they have really big claws that are sort of wrapping around there around the foot, but then the bottom of the foot pad is an actual pad. So we know by looking at sauropod foot bones that they had a similar pad to elephants, which is really cool.
Because you're having to support
Yeah.
those leg bones you showed earlier are massive, and then
Yeah.
they're supporting a massive animal, and so that's a lot of weight, and so you're distributing it over this pad.
Yeah,
Elephants,
it's like a shock
it's
absorber.
interesting because mammals, some mammals have claws, some don't. They all have nails, but so interesting that these sauropods. And are there differences in the front and back with the tortoise in the same way you were finding with sauropods?
Yes. Yeah. So there's a little bit of a similarity there too. And then figure C here is a desert tortoise's foot. This was actually a tortoise I worked with at the museum in LA. And you can see there's claws on the end of their foot. And then they also have these big scales on their feet for traction and sort of helping grip. And elephants, because skin kind of breaks and scars, it has a very similar scaly like texture on the bottom. And so they all kind of share a little bit of similarity there. So what we looked at was sauropod foot function. So when they are flexing their foot, what does that look like? Because if you're going to be trying to get yourself out of mud, and there's sauropod trackways across the world preserved beautifully in different places.
Oh, lovely.
Especially we looked at, for our research, we looked at various trackways that sauropods had been stuck in that was a very like wet substrate, so like mudstones, kind of gloppy, wet,
So not like volcanic ash, like when we're looking at Australopithecine footprints in
I don't think we
in
had
Rift
any
Valley in
ash.
Africa.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
It's
So
mostly mud.
sure.
And so this image here shows the hypothesis we were trying to disprove, which is like, can they get themselves unmired if they get stuck? We have a site here at the museum called the Mother's Day site that for many years was thought that sauropods had been mired and stuck in mud because they found a bunch of foot bones that were stuck and preserved in mud. And it's actually out by this leg that I showed here. And so the hypothesis that we looked at, we were looking at foot function. And one thing you have to look at with tortoises and sauropods and all animals, especially of the reptilian nature, is that they were egg layers. And so if they're not using their feet, because it's kind of weird to evolve foot claws to get yourself out of mud. Like how much are sauropods
I was just
in
going to
mud?
say, to me, it seems more like you're needing to dig for some reason, and
Yeah.
then digging to make a nest, which I feel like is where you're going, makes a lot more sense for
Yep.
why you would retain them, even though you have this big body and you don't need it for mobility to move around so much
Yeah.
most of the time. Okay, so go ahead.
And so what
That's
we're looking at
fascinating.
here, so the picture on the right here is a picture of a sauropod nest. And sauropod nests are not like the nests that are sitting right outside of our studio window here. They're not contained in a nice little package. They're sort of this trough. And so how do you lay eggs in a trough? It's actually like a dugout trough with a rim, and they're laying their eggs in one area. And so by looking at sauropod nests, we went, I wonder if this means that they were also using their claws to dig nests. And so, let's go back here. So what we had looked at then was basically that the evidence that we had seen from trackways and with the evidence of sauropod foot flexion is that they were not getting themselves unmired, but they were actually using those claws to dig their nests with, which makes more sense evolutionarily.
Because then it also, if it's a trough, you could imagine a hind leg especially moving
Right.
I mean, when I just look at
Yeah.
animals and the way they when
Mhm.
my little dog every once in a while after she does her business, she scratches with her back feet and the
Yeah.
claws kick
Kinda,
up stuff and you're like, not a lot's happening, but
Yeah.
you could imagine a much bigger animal
Right.
would have that. But I mean, still it's amazing to me to think that you've got your head way up here,
Way
you've
up
got this
here.
gigantic body, you're using this back foot to make a trench, and then you're hoping to aim your egg laying.
Yeah.
Like, do you turn around and then like nose it in and check it out? Because I would be like, I have no idea if I made it in the trench or
Absolutely.
not. I
So
mean,
this is
that's
the fun about paleontology. So you have this body plan, which doesn't really change across sauropods. We have like a little bit of soft tissue when it comes to their skin.
Yeah.
We have amazing bones in many collections across the world, but these animals would not fit in a building. You know, they're so enormous. And so
Huge.
they're not able to, dig
like
a
if you
dig a
had
nest
all
with
the
their
neck kind of vertebrae, right?
Yeah.
Like they would just be a couple stories
Yeah,
high. So
absolutely.
wow.
And so they're not using their head for anything with nesting. They can't like, if you put your head towards the ground and a predator's around and
Oh yeah.
your head as a sauropod is only like this big.
Mm.
And so that head gets snapped off, you're dead,
That's
So
it.
their head
That's
is
it.
way up here.
Yeah.
And so those big pillar-like legs, we hypothesize are actually digging nests like tortoises are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because they can't really turn around and see what they're doing either. They're
Yeah.
doing it in sand mostly.
Yeah.
And so what do we
Like a
think?
soft substrate.
So do we just figure it's a similarly soft substrate for sauropods, or because they have such powerful legs
Yeah.
and claws, it could have been
They could move,
anything.
harder.
they
Anything.
could move dirt. I mean,
Okay.
most likely, in the environment they were in the Jurassic period is going to be wet and warm and humid.
Mm.
And
The
so,
things have moisture
Yeah.
easier to.
I mean, not all sauropods lived in warm, humid areas, but their legs were powerful and they could,
Mhm.
carve out these nests. And they also laid their nests in like massive groups. So these sauropods were nesting in, like football fields wide areas.
So a bunch
Yeah.
of females
Mhm.
would nest in the same place, and then maybe, and this is a question I don't know if everyone knows the answer to because I'm not a paleontologist.
Yeah.
How often would they lay eggs? Do you
Yeah.
think?
I can't think off the top of my head what the research says about how often.
Like if it's annually,
Um,
I don't even know how long they live
yeah.
for, but they seem, because they're so big, like they would live for a long life. So you wonder
Yeah.
how many times does a female sauropod lay eggs
Yeah.
and come back to a similar place? But it seems like you have multiple females
Yeah.
using a big area.
A big resource.
That's
And
yeah.
fascinating.
Do they stick around or they kind of do their thing and
That's
then
what I was
take
gonna
off?
mention.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So sauropods are not the best parents. Sorry. A lot of dinosaurs are, our state dinosaur is Maiasaura, and Maiasaura, per the research of Jack Horner and Holly Woodward and many others, found out that Maiasaura was taking care of their babies.
Aw.
And Maiasaura means good mother lizard.
Mm,
Sauropods,
not so much.
God love them. They're huge. They nested in one area, and it's basically just nesting, laying as many eggs in one area as possible, leaving, and then hoping for the best. So they're like, "See you later, kids.
Oh,
Good luck
yeah.
out there."
Can you say how they know the difference between who was a good mother and who wasn't?
Yeah. So there's strategies, and God, it's been a while since biology, but K strategies and R strategies.
Right. Laying a ton versus
Yeah.
laying not as many.
So
Okay.
having one baby or two babies like a deer, or
Like rabbits or mice having a lot.
yeah, or like a sea turtle,
Okay.
for example.
Okay.
So you either have one baby and you take care of it until it's grown up and you protect it from everything and feed it, or you just have 100 eggs and you lay them in one place and then you hope for the best.
Yeah.
Right.
And
like
so it's
fish,
like
even,
fish
sort of
or
frogs
insects.
or okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
All right. So the idea with with our state dinosaur
Yeah.
is that there were fewer than eggs laid.
So there were nests that were laid that were they also nested communally, but what's interesting about the embryos that were found was that the babies themselves didn't have the strength or development of their limbs to actually stand.
Oh, okay.
And so by looking at the bone morphology of these babies, you could see that mom and dad had to take care of them. They look more like a songbird and less like a goose or a duck,
Okay.
where geese and ducks just get up and they run around right away.
Right
and they're
away,
like in
right.
the water, ready to go.
Okay.
That's what these guys probably would have been like.
Okay.
So hatch out of the egg, open their eyes, they're hiding in plants, maybe they're fending for themselves. Whereas Maiasaura was hanging out in the nest, helpless little, babies being taken care of by mom and dad and protected
Okay.
by aunts and uncles and things.
Very interesting.
Very
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
All right. Well,
We
that
could talk about that forever.
I know. So, but should we move on then?
Yeah.
Okay. And you really did a very good example of what you do here at the Museum of the Rockies. So
Exactly.
you really gave us a good education on the sauropod. Now I feel like I know so much more than I did
Cool.
when we walked into this podcast today. So thank you, Ashley. But maybe you could tell us a little bit more about what you do at
Yeah.
the Museum of the Rockies
Sure.
and what kind of education programs you do and what kind of education you do in this studio.
Yeah. So this was a project I took on upon my hiring in 2021, and the E.L. Wiegand Foundation has sponsored this beautiful space. We had a grant that was started by employees that were my direct supervisor and then people before her. And so when I started, it had been written into my job, and so I had worked with and when I heard about this project, I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, I would love to design a studio. Are you kidding me? And so this is part of my job now. So I am the manager of the E.L. Wiegand Digital Learning Studio, which has classes, virtual tours, and other just sort of like interactions with, teachers and educators across the world. So our mission at Museum of the Rockies is to bring Montana to the world and the world to Montana. And so as part of this, Montana's really darn big. I mean,
It
we
is.
all know it's
Yeah.
huge. and
Bringing
it's
Montana to
hard.
Montana should be in
Yeah.
there too. I
Yeah,
know.
I
I know there's a
know.
lot going on there.
We
Yeah.
get calls from, teachers and they really want to come here, but it's like 6-7 hours sometimes. And so we say, well, instead, do you want to Zoom with us into your classroom? And we can also send you an outreach kit with fossils in it or, pelts or skulls. And you can interact with us and take a virtual class. So right now I run our virtual classes and organize our virtual programs. And then I also do our outreach kits and sort of maintain and update those, as well as adult programs. And as we always say, other duties as assigned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's lots of different things we do in museums that we should make a whole separate podcast about, because no one would ever believe what we do in museums.
The other things
Yeah.
museum professionals do.
Yeah.
That does sound like a podcast.
It does,
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
Well, this is a beautiful studio. And it's, you're only seeing a small part if you're watching this on YouTube, but it's just, it goes on and
There's
it's,
even more to see.
amazing. It's like Darwin's office in
Yeah.
here. And so it's
Speaking
such a-
of,
okay.
so I have a little
Oh, wow.
room inspiration.
Yeah.
So if we cut back, so there we go. So my inspiration for the design of the studio was Charles Darwin's office at Down House.
Fantastic. I
And,
haven't actually
uh,
seen that picture
I
before.
haven't
That's so
either.
cool.
Wow. Yeah.
And so I took sort of the essence and the inspiration from that.
Right.
Also, Emily Grassley from the Field Museum's show, The Brain Scoop.
Oh,
she's a-
fantastic.
She's a friend of mine, and so I was taking notes from her set, and then we made this set.
Wonderful.
Well, when
and-
Crystal and I saw it, we were like, we really want to record in that studio.
Yeah.
We were so inspired. So
Yeah.
that's super
Yeah.
exciting. Yeah.
So there's a
Awesome.
little bit of inspiration from everybody in there.
Yeah. And it's very homey too. I mean, there is that sense like you showed of the picture of
Yes.
Darwin's office. There's a place to sit over here. And so we sit and have conversations and it's a wonderful space.
Yeah. A place
Yeah.
to think big thoughts.
I'm glad
Yes,
yes.
I drew you guys in.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
And speaking of big thoughts, so you've written 2 children's books.
Yeah.
And Crystal,
yeah.
maybe you'll hold them up when I say
Okay.
the title. So one, which is out already, is Fossils for Kids. Super cool. A junior scientist's guide to dinosaur bones, ancient animals, and prehistoric life on Earth. So that's fantastic. And I feels like there's a lot in it, but it's not overwhelming for a kid. And what sort of age group would you recommend for
So
this
this
book?
one is ages 5 to 12.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can enjoy it for a long time
Yeah.
too.
And
Probably get
it's-
a lot more
It's a
out of
good
it.
one. Like, it's actually, I wrote it and this is part of like science communication, right? So it's like taking all of the cool, interesting information that it swims around in our heads every day and distills it not down, but makes it accessible for people. And so in this book, it sort of acts as like a mini reference book. So I've had adults who are like, really enjoying it because it's just little.
Love children's books as a way to dip into something that I need to quickly learn something about, because it gives you that essence. Who did you work with to bring this book to life?
So this one was Callisto Media, was the publisher. And this was actually my COVID project. So when everyone else was learning sourdough, I had been contacted by Callisto Media to write a kid's book.
So they reached out to you. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on that. And you have another one in the works called Prehistoric Worlds, Stomp into the Epic Lands Ruled by Dinosaurs.
Wow.
Great title. Yeah.
I'm so excited because this is the first time world premiere that this has ever been announced.
Oh,
yay! And it'll be out in March. Is that
March
right?
30th.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
March 30th. Okay, so
Wow.
just in time for April Fool's Day presents. I don't know. Just get it. Just get it. It's going to be great. And will we have them here at Museum of the Rockies?
Yes.
okay.
Yay! And is it the same publisher?
No, it's actually DK.
Okay.
Out of the
Okay.
UK.
Wow,
And,
fancy.
If you're
Mm.
familiar with DK, as I was as a kid, I grew up on DK eyewitness books.
Oh, right.
So I
Okay.
really like was the inspiration for me to like dive into science. And so it really has come full circle. And I love DK. They were wonderful to work with. They gave me full liberty on what it looked like, what was
Wow.
going in it. I designed the pages, like the spreads and everything. They really
Oh,
gave me like
nice.
full creative control. And so
Good.
I'm so excited to get it into the hands
Congratulations.
of kids everywhere. So
Yeah.
you can buy it at the museum gift shop. You can buy it on Target, Amazon, basically.
Under.
It's
think
so
you could
exciting.
Probably pre-order it now
Pre-order.
on Amazon if you
Mhm.
go and probably other places as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's beautiful. It's actually more illustrated and less wordy. And so it's got beautiful illustrations by a woman that I worked with named Claire. And I was there to help consult on what these animals looked like, so it was a really cool relationship because, as an illustrator, she didn't draw dinosaurs really ever, and so I'm like, okay, well, can you make this one like this? And, sort of give a little scientific insight. To
That's
what this looks
fantastic.
like.
Oh, that's
So-
wonderful.
I think seeing the images brings it to life. And then there is another book that isn't about dinosaurs, but that you worked on with your husband.
Yeah.
And so let's show that one
Okay.
too. It's Gems for Kids. And this is
Kids.
also available here. And this one's also out. And that's super exciting because
I love Jen.
I remember getting those little crystal growing
Yes,
things
yes,
for my
yeah.
kids and them being fascinated. And there are these crazy places in South Africa where you can go into a gigantic room and sit there and pick up as many rocks as that'll fit in this little pouch that you pay for. You can take them
Yeah.
home. It's called a
Oh.
scratch patch. And
Oh.
we used to love bringing our kids there. But just the way this again is, it looks like a delightful way of explaining about gems that would sort of have a large age range. So you
Yeah.
can start young and then still get a lot out of it.
And
as
we
they
put everything
struggle.
in there from like birthstones
Yeah.
to experiments to what is a gem, what is a mineral. And my husband's background, he's the
I was just gonna say, is he just like a gem collector, or let's give him a full background.
Oh, my husband Lee Hall is the lab and field manager for Museum of the Rockies, and so he runs the dinosaur digs with Dr. John Scanella.
That's fantastic.
Wonderful.
But
Fantastic.
he has more of a geology background than I do, so I'm more of like the biology side. I did animal behavior in school and anthropology, and then he did geology and paleontology.
That's
Okay.
that's a
Okay.
good combo.
Good combo. A good
Yeah.
combo. So I want to continue to talk about your education and how you educate people. And of course, as time goes on, we find different ways to do education and communication. And I have to say, Ashley, you are a social media maven. You do so well. And I follow your Instagram page. And
yeah.
it's just so enjoyable. And I've learned so much just from that.
You
So
learned about Taylor Swift?
I have learned a lot
or-
about Taylor Swift.
And how she loves dinosaurs,
and
right?
yeah,
I know. No, we don't know.
I don't know, but
Yeah.
yeah, which is important for me because my daughter is a huge Taylor Swift fan. So
good.
I can like have conversations with Emily about Taylor
Fantastic.
Swift based on your
Happy to
Instagram.
be a Taylor Swift educator.
But no, you put other things on there as well besides Taylor Swift. But I want you to just talk about that a little
Yeah.
bit and how you do media communication and
Yeah.
education
Good.
and the importance of that.
So I started science communication with social media back when Instagram first started, because Instagram was that, new app where you take a picture and you post it right away. Well, when I was first working at the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles County and the Brea Tar Pits, I would see these amazing things every single day. So I'd walk by a case and there's a saber-toothed cat, or I'd be outside and there's, a Gulf fritillary butterfly, or I was just like amazed by everything around. And I really just wanted to share everything that I was seeing with the world, because I thought, well, if this is cool to me, it must be cool to other people. And so I started sharing pictures on social media paired with, facts about them to help educate people about the stuff that I like to learn about. And so that's really how my social media started. And taking my educational background on talking to people in museum galleries and spaces, and then putting that online. And when I started, there was a whole movement on, science communication, science communicators. It's not the first time it had happened, but it was the first time it was sort of transferred to the internet.
Right.
And so I jumped on this whole movement of these people, these science communicators that make learning fun, basically, right?
And
Yeah.
and understandable by the public.
Yeah.
Kind of
yeah.
translating science to the
Yeah.
public.
And there's a big disconnect, as we all, know and feel in the most recent years, where it's like, science sometimes can be daunting, it can be scary, it can be intimidating.
It can be boring
it
if
can
it's
be
not
terribly
presented
really
right, or you
dry.
don't know why this thing that is being shown all over the news is actually important, or the ways in which it could become very important.
Yeah.
Right.
And when I was looking into the research behind people's mentalities around science, I was seeing that, many studies were showing that people had a big distrust in scientists.
Interesting.
And mainly because no one understood or knew the scientists. And so there was this big movement to show people's faces online and to say, hey, I'm a scientist, so am I. I'm a, rocket science, I'm a geologist, I'm a,
Right.
to sort of like elucidate the face of science, right? Because it's not just a white guy in a lab coat. It's,
Right.
people of all different
A
backgrounds.
whole range of people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so
So-
people could see themselves. Do you have any tips for communicating? Because Instagram, it's kind of a nice bite size where it's often a captivating image. And then I don't know how much text that you write, or what you would advise for both the image part and the text part that you have felt has been
Yeah.
a good sort of mix of what
Yeah.
should go up. Yeah.
And there is an overlap too. I think just like museums, and I've worked at zoos as well, where, if you're in a museum or a zoo and you're looking at a label, how long are you going to spend
Mhm.
reading it?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a similar mentality when I'm thinking about writing something. And I see a lot of people online that do a huge panel, right? Like a Wikipedia amount of work, right?
Right.
But are people reading it? And we don't know those stats from just like Instagram statistics alone. But I feel like a good amount is like, a paragraph or maybe a little bit more, especially if you make it interesting. And so getting yourself on social media and being a science communicator on social media is really interesting, because it gives you sort of another platform. Like I used to spend all day at the tar pits talking to people and giving tours, but then when you're actually sitting down and thinking about something and trying to verbalize it, it gets your brain to work in a different way. And so it was a way for me to like share and learn and get myself to become like a bit more of a writer, I guess. Because reading and writing is very different than speaking to someone,
Trying to
and-
engage them in that different way. You only have so many words, probably so much time
yeah.
that they're going to look at it. And
Yeah.
yeah, it is a different skill.
And also like
go
the
ahead.
accessibility issue.
Yeah.
Where it's like, are people reading? Are they listening to it? Are they watching captions? Like there's all these ways now you can engage with many different people. So
do people ask you questions on your Instagram or
Not
your
as
social
much as
media?
I don't know. I do a Q&A
You've
once in a
educated them all,
while,
so
but,
yeah.
there's a lot of science communicators out there now, and honestly, everyone's doing an amazing job. And
Yeah.
so there's many people that we follow online that, you know, if you guys put up my social media, I share from time to time just to get other names out there too.
Yeah.
And I just picked up a new gig, so I'm actually doing social media as a side hustle again,
Oh, really?
for another podcast called Paleo Nerds.
Oh,
And
excellent.
It's a
Yeah.
wonderful podcast that is by paleo nerds for paleo nerds. So
Oh, wonderful.
Very
Good.
So is there a Twitter was something that you had listed and
Yeah.
it's not called Twitter anymore. Since the change, since Elon Musk bought it, is that still a platform that you use and has it changed at all?
I've actually stuck by it. It's one of those things where, you know, paleontology and just like anthropology, they're really small worlds.
Yeah.
And it's one of the best ways to keep in touch with people.
Mhm.
And so a lot of the paleo community still exists on Twitter. I think it's a very specialized, you know, very specific. I know there's a lot of biologists and stuff on there too, but yes, I am still on X
Okay.
/ Twitter.
Okay. Okay. But that's not where maybe you do the bulk of your
Yeah, the bulk is
Big-
mainly
yeah.
Instagram.
Okay,
I would say,
interesting.
when I have time, and Facebook.
okay.
Mhm.
So we wanted to note on your CV that you've also done archaeological research,
Yeah,
as we, you know, had talked about earlier, that you have this background in anthropology, and you co-authored a paper titled, I'm going to butcher this, the
Wasion, yeah.
Wasion Clovis Fluted Point Preform
Yes.
from Northwest Ohio.
Yes.
Observations, geometric morphometrics, microware, and toolstone procurement distance. Now I know what all those things mean, so I feel very smart right now.
I don't.
So talk a little bit about that. How much archaeology have you done? Because it's fun when you get into sort of Clovis era, you're getting
Yeah.
into some extinct mammals, mammoths and the larger bison.
The
that-
overlap.
right,
Yeah.
you know, where those things are gone and you have people here who we know were in the Americas and hunting and they keep pushing that back, which is fascinating.
It's
But
like
yeah.
22,000 years now.
Possibly, right, with the with our podcast about the
Yeah.
footprints at White
Yeah.
Sands and some more research to back that up that came out more recently in the last few months. So
Yeah.
yeah, tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
that.
So my background in archaeology was in zooarchaeology, so looking at the way that humans interact with animals, and it's not a subfield that I often hear about in the general public. I don't know if, I mean, maybe people
It's
out
so
there.
important, especially in Montana, where a lot of what we have left is stone tools and bones, faunal remains, the bones of animals that
Yeah.
were used by humans in some way, or the remains of food. And so I think the zooarchaeology stuff, there's a lot of students here who, when they would take a class with Jack Fisher as an undergrad, would be really fascinated because you
Yeah.
could even tell what season a bison was killed in.
Yeah.
Yes. So go ahead. So
Okay.
yeah, I love it.
So there's a little bit of an overlap. So growing up, I was interested in paleontology. So you're like, why is this girl in anthropology now? Well, so long story short, I'm terrible at math. Was not diagnosed in time to know I had dyscalculia. I can never say it right. Number switching, like
Oh,
what do you call it? Dyslexia.
Like
It's
dyslexia, but with
numbers.
numbers even
With
more so
numbers.
than with words.
And
Okay.
so when I was
wow.
looking at schools, so I'm a terrible test taker, couldn't place, did terrible on the SATs, did not even attempt a GRE, but I've gotten like A's and B's my whole life in school.
Right.
Terrible anxiety, terrible depression, terrible math skills. And so I got into my like third choice college, which was Indiana University. Shout out to IU, incredible school. Sorry it was third choice, but I wanted to go other places. But IU Bloomington is great with anthropology, and they have this incredible zooarchaeology lab, and it was kind of the perfect combination of animals and sort of prehistoric-esque adjacent things, and also bones, which I've always been obsessed with. And then I took geology on the side, but I didn't go the geology route because it had too much math, too much
Chemistry, me too.
My God,
Yeah,
how?
I didn't want to. I like the other aspects of archaeology that I could do because that was also not a strength of mine.
Yeah,
I'm okay reading papers and understanding them,
same.
but for me to do the research, that part of it wasn't as interesting to me. And like you, I really prefer almost the translation education side, and I do have my own ideas and do my own research. But if it involves chemistry or math, I'm either
Wow.
not an author or I'm way down on the list. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not as comfortable
I mean,
for
and
me.
shout out to everyone who is good at it. 'Cause
Yes,
y'all make
we
the world
need
go
all
round.
of that. We need all of that. Yep.
But when I was looking at the anthropology program, they had this robust zooarchaeology lab, and zoo meaning like animals,
Mhm.
and archaeology being archaeology, right? Digging up
Yep, yep.
past
Old things. Yep.
things.
Mhm.
And so I was like, yeah, that sounds really cool. So zooarchaeology deals with people and animals. So people domesticating animals, people eating animals, people
Exactly.
using animals in various ways, like horses. And so with zooarchaeology, I got interested in bone identification.
Yes.
And so I love sitting down with a pile of bones and looking at them and going, okay, this is a femur, this is a tibia, this is a radius. You know,
Right.
I love getting my hands on them, feeling the different, points and articulations,
Yes.
and just understanding like how these animals moved and anatomy and stuff like that. And so the research that I worked on in school was bison subsistence strategies. So looking at bison and big North American plains animals from hunter-gatherer groups, so predating any modern tribes,
Right.
that were moving and nomadic and camping and hunting animals, and then having these like temporary encampments that then they would hunt, bring animals back to camp, butcher them, and then, discard the bones in midden piles. And so I was looking at the remains of bison and deer and rabbits and turtles and all sorts of things that people were eating, and identifying the bones.
Right.
So
Super fun.
so anyway, so the Wasion Clovis point.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a different story. That was like an adjacent project to my research, but it was really neat because my aunt, who was living in Ohio at the time, was
A lot of archaeology in Ohio. A lot of good
there is
archaeology.
much
So much.
so
Yeah.
many. And so she
Yeah.
was living on this property. She had points that she had found on her property and had brought them to me at like a family dinner, and asked what they were. And I took one look at this point and I went,
Oh.
Oh boy.
that's
That's an important one.
Clovis is so
like,
distinctive. Yes.
is a
Yes.
Clovis point.
Wow.
And that means it's at least 14,000 years old.
Crazy. Yep.
And I never got to visit her place, and she's since sold it. But basically, I obtained the point from her, and I showed it to some specialists when I was working at the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. And sure enough, one of the point specialists, who is his name is Aaron, he looked at it and said, "This is a Clovis preform point." Which means that it was not fluted yet.
Right. It was on its way to being a
yeah.
fluted Clovis.
So someone was making this beautiful, big point. I don't know if you call that like a spear necessarily. Is that?
Yeah, it would be more like
Mm.
on either a spear or an atlatl.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be on a bow and arrow because
Yeah.
usually they're a bit too big, we think.
So
Yeah.
this big point still had the little nubbin at the bottom where a person would have eventually broken that off to make that fit on a shaft. And so it's really neat because he took a look at this point and said, you know what, this is actually kind of an incredible transitional point. Like we have the ones that are fluted, we have the ones that are being made, but we don't have many that are of this, stage
Wow.
in its creation.
Wow.
And so that was a cool study.
I'm sure somebody
Yeah.
was looking for that for a long time and didn't mean to drop it.
Right,
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Like people find all these archaeological points, and it's like,
know.
were they walking and dropped it? Did they
Yeah.
throw it out of frustration?
Or were
Um,
they placed in a ceremonial way? And
Yeah.
and there's a lot of Native people who
Yes.
talk about that archaeologists will find a point out in the middle of a field or by a creek or somewhere, and you always wonder, well, why was this placed here? Why did someone
Yeah.
just lose it out of their pocket? Well, probably not. Probably a lot of times the point was used and then it was given back to the earth for
Oh.
in gratitude or for other reasons. And so I always try to bring that up because there was a Shoshone gentleman who talked about that in a workshop that we did. And
So
I
it's
thought
not
that
that
was,
people are just
no, they're not
yeah.
losing them, 'cause
Especially if
they
they're
wouldn't lose
perfect points that
Right.
weren't broken or anything like that. Because
Right.
you find often those in bison kill sites.
Mhm.
And sure, there would have been a lot that went in. People didn't bother to go in and retrieve those. But as you said, then sometimes you find, and then sometimes you find, especially during the Clovis period, whole caches
Mm.
of the raw material and levels of preform.
Wow.
And there'll be ochre in there too. And sometimes, like in Montana, it's found right along a creek bed and things like that. So what material? Was it obsidian? Was it something else? Do you know
It
what the material was?
I believe it was flint from
Because they must have done, it
Gosh.
looks like from the title that they were
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
some sourcing of that too.
yeah.
So that's
And it's
cool.
because the stone type, and I can't remember because I haven't read it in so long, but the material that it was transported from a specific location.
That
So
they
they were
could
able to
actually
trace
do
it
like the
back to-
geochemistry, which is cool. And
Yeah.
usually for Clovis, they used very high quality materials because
was
to make
beautiful.
those
Yeah.
points, you really needed something that didn't have a lot of imperfections. So you see a lot of obsidian, but probably very high quality
Yeah.
or flint.
You
So
know,
that's
what we should do in the
Yeah.
future, I feel like we should also talk about a lot of times that the material that stone tools are made of has fossils in them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
that's
And
true.
It'd be
are like
fun.
made of petrified wood,
Yes.
or you know,
Yeah.
have crinoids in them. or
Yeah,
whatever.
absolutely.
In archaeological sites, we often find where people have picked up fossils and then kept them
And
and
it's-
they're in bundles or
Yep.
they're in important places within the archaeological site. And so they so there's a lot of different ways that people
They're recognized as
always-
something special.
have always
I love that fossils
Yeah.
have always been
special. They're special.
well,
Yeah.
especially like the little sections of ammonite that
Yes.
fall out.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Buffalo stones.
Yes,
Yes.
and that's what I'm thinking of is the buffalo stones.
Those are cool.
So that's really neat. Well, this has been such an amazing conversation
Yeah.
today, Ashley. And it's been so nice to visit with you about your work and what you
Yeah.
do. And we
Yeah.
kind of knew what you did to a certain degree, but it was nice to take a deeper dive and really
Yeah.
better understand what you do here
Yeah.
at the museum, but in your academic life as well.
Yeah,
So,
it's all sorts. We could talk for days about
know we
everything.
could.
I know. I know you'll be on another
my God.
podcast again, and that's super exciting. And
So
go ahead.
can
Yeah.
you tell us again where people can find the book?
Yeah.
And then also if you want to share your Instagram and Twitter or X and anything else you want to share on your website too.
Yeah, so my books can be purchased wherever books are sold. So try to purchase from local booksellers if you can. But otherwise Amazon, Target, Barnes and Noble, etc. So that's Fossils for Kids is out now. And then there it is. Prehistoric Worlds is going to be out March 30th on pre-sale
Yay.
now. And then also Gems for Kids is great too. And if anybody wants a signed copy, you can either find me at Museum of the Rockies or I'm happy to you or something similar. So I love personalizing the books as well.
Yeah.
And then my Instagram is at lady_naturalist. And I don't post as much as I used to, but I'm starting to again. So
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so
Fantastic.
much.
Well, thanks, Ashley.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
thanks to everybody watching and listening and for joining us today. If you love the podcast and the video cast, please tell a friend and make sure you subscribe, especially for the podcast, wherever that shows up on your feed each week. And if you can, leave a review on Apple Podcasts
Yes.
or Spotify, please.
Please leave
So
reviews.
yeah, we need it. So thanks for listening
And
or
maybe
watching
future
us today.
topics.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
questions or
Yeah.
future topics,
Yeah.
please do that. We
Always
would love
open to that.
some feedback and maybe we'll find a way to make it even easier to do that. And we could start delving into topics that are coming from you all and questions that you have.
And things like dinosaurs that
We don't know anything about dinosaurs, so we'll have to ask
So
Ashley. So
cool.
that's okay. I know. So please, find us again, and we hope you join us next time to find out more about The dirt on the past. Yay! Crystal's gonna finish us off here. I know.
Yeah, so a big thank you to the Museum of the Rockies for the use of this beautiful space that you've created, Ashley. And thanks to also the folks at Museum of the Rockies, including Chelsea Hogan, Ashley Hall, and Michael Fox. And thanks to Lawson Alegria for mixing the music.
Yay!
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone. Thanks.
Bye-bye.